All right, so welcome everybody to the episode 2 of the art therapy, where we're gonna be discussing the... Hey, editor Javi here. This was a slow start. I interrupted my holidays to do this session and I had just woken up from a needed nap and, my brain wasn't up yet. So I edited this episode to make sure that you don't have to go through the pain of seeing me gain momentum, and I'm cutting to the first question right away. Back to the video. So let's just get into it. How do you stop art from becoming your entire identity and still keep a healthy distance? I was definitely not ready for such a deep topic. Can you give me an example of somebody whose art was their entire identity? I think I know what you mean. We get so fixated with, we're doing what we love, that it becomes a part of ourselves. And I'm guessing that for you, this is a problem. Maybe you find yourself having conversations with people and saying, I'm an artist. And, at least based on my experience, when being an artist was a huge chunk of my identity, I did expect bigger reactions from people when I said, I'm an artist for games. People generally don't care. So you do expect those reactions, and most of the time you might get them. I would say a lot of people who share the same interest as you will definitely give you those reactions, and that will be a great icebreaker. But generally what I would say is form your identity based on what you want to be rather than what you think other people will find cool, because people will generally not have you in their brains for more than maybe 5 minutes while they have you in front of them. And I guess if somebody has that bad assumption of who you are, of your identity, that's somebody who you don't want in your life in the first place. But maybe we're going in a direction that that's not where Kalen is asking this question from. So let's see. Personally, I was so focused on art that I would cut other parts of life off, hobbies, to focus on my art, mainly because I felt like I'm not an artist. Your identity was a very strong part of your life, so strong that while you wanted to make being an artist part of your identity had an effect or some sort of control over who you wanted to be. I mean, I feel like this one is going to be for the community, because for me, being somebody who comes from, let's say, a rough childhood when it comes to being accepted by other people. So my story is kind of strange. I mean, probably a very normal story for anybody, but I come from this background where being accepted was out of the question because I wasn't. So being accepted was something that I learned wasn't so important to dictate the choices of my life. So when it came to my identity, I was never scared to make it my own, because I realized that I understood my identity as something that was more towards others than it was towards myself. Now, probably this is something that I developed myself, but that maybe other people feel that identity as something that helps them make decisions. Sorry, I'm not sure if that's the right way. I knew this question was going to be very difficult because it's one that since I'm 16, I kind of don't relate to this, but definitely that not being accepted as a child helped me understand that identity, it was something that I had to like skateboarding. Doesn't matter that any other person liked skateboarding. I had to like it. I'm the one who spends 10 hours a day skating on the skate park or on the street or whatever. And that, maybe my school peers don't share this or don't want to see me like this cool guy that I see myself as being, because especially when you're a child, you want to be sort of maybe not popular, but you want to be accepted. So that acceptance, that identity, or people accepting my identity, it was something that very early on I understood, or the way I coped with this sort of pain was to not give it any sort of importance. Kaelin is saying, I was chasing the identity of being an artist and setting that above all my needs, interests, and wants, neglecting all of those things for stuff I thought made me look like an artist. So you wanted to prove something to others. The identity you wanted to build was more important, I guess, than your actual identity. I think we're on the right path your actual identity. So I'm guessing, how do you stop art from becoming your entire identity and still keep a healthy distance? I think a big part of being an artist is also learning to live life. Live all sorts of experiences. All of that will enrich your art, I believe. All of those experiences will also shape your identity, and identity will naturally come. What is wrong with me today? I can't even read. We're going to take a break from this question. I'm going to say something that I want to say. Sometimes you're tired. And I think right now what we're going to do is we're going to use myself as the prime example of giving yourself space. If today I make some mistakes, if today I say things that maybe don't fit or I don't solve the questions to the level of standards and quality, or this session doesn't come out to the level that I want it to come out, that's fine. We're gonna think about what happens when I'm too tired. So what happens when I'm too tired to do something to a high level of quality? Set the base goal. And see that goal being accomplished. So today my goal is to have a conversation with you, is to have fun, and to make sure that we solve these questions and have fun. So today we're gonna have fun. And we're gonna set a secondary goal here, which is also very primary. Let's say it's their top one with having fun. I'm gonna try and learn from you. What happens when I'm too tired to do something to a high level of quality? I'm gonna try to have fun, and I'm also not going to be scared to take the back seat if I have to. Now, probably today it's gonna be a little bit difficult to take that back seat because obviously I'm presenting to you. So let's read some very interesting questions on the chat. And let's get them here as answers. And let's make the best out of what we can make today. And by the end of it, at least we did something. And this answer, it is, I think, what resonates with me the most. A big part of being an artist is also learning to live life. And this is a big issue that I find with pretty much everybody that I've met. We focus so hard on being an artist professionally that everything else takes the back seat. It makes us depressed, it makes us compare ourselves to others like we spoke on the past episode, and adopt very toxic practices towards ourselves and our lifestyles. And we fail to realize that when you don't use part of your time to experience life, and your job as an artist is, I would say in my case at least, is to represent life as it is, you stop to have a grasp on what is it that you have to represent. Andy, I think this is probably the best answer. I'm going to read it again for the recording. I think a big part of being an artist is also learning to live life, live all sorts of experiences. All of that will enrich your art. Then all of those experiences will shape you and your identity will naturally come out. Definitely. I think we can learn a lot from how they used to do it in the old days in Disney and concept art. You cannot create art if you have not lived it, right? Yes, exactly. So when you want to be an animator, go look at life. Watch people be happy, be sad, watch them make faces that curl your gut. Concept art is the same. Find what is unique to you and let it drive your creations or briefs. Life is full of incredibly vast moments that engulf us whole, and that's the point of it. That's in a very simple understanding what art is, your opinion of the world on the canvas. Actually, that is great. Your opinion of the world onto the canvas. Wow. Let's put it here. That's amazing. I love that. This is going to be a little bit more technical. How do you balance the pressure of making technically excellent 3D art with the need to stay playful and experimental? And you're clarifying in the chat, yes, a bit more technical, but I really just want to know how I can balance not creating just for the portfolio, but also trying to stretch one's limits by trying new things. Okay, so it's about steps. It's about those baby steps that we were talking about the other day. So with these baby steps, or that one step at a time, we can start to understand art in a little bit more of a manageable way. Steps are a very personal thing. Your steps to make art and my steps to make art can be different. And we are in an industry that is sometimes so technical that it looks like art has a standardized procedure. And yes, it does, if you work for a certain company that has a standard procedure. But generally, this company that has this very standard procedure will also be looking for people who can be flexible, creative, and that can think outside of the box. So to think outside of the box, first you need a box. And that's what you're going to create today. You're going to create that box. So with those baby steps, you're going to think, okay, so what is a good piece of art? You're going to go on step 1, ideation. And you're going to go on the process of making things exist. So when you start to think about these processes as you can break them down and you generate that sort of box, then you can think outside that box. So based on your initial question, the pressure of making technically excellent 3D art with the need to stay playful and experimental, that is achieved by you having that box that you created. That process that might or might not be standardized, it might be yours, It might be some other companies, but I think in both examples, you're creating a box. So create that box, give it time. You cannot expect that box to be made in, let's say, the first year. Maybe, you can have a good idea of what that box could look like and you can start experimenting outside of that box. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the way that you stay playful and experimental is by thinking outside of the box. But don't be scared to give yourself some time first to develop the box, your process. Kaden is saying, so the box is constraints. Yes. The box is constraints, limitations, and it's also the limitation of not having ideas. So yes, you should experiment with those constraints when the problem and feedback demands it and grow from there, as you're saying on your chat. And you're saying also, I remember we were talking about this similar thing when talking about intention and focusing on creating close to what is real and taking away or adding based on the box we made and feedback. Yes, this is a really important question at the end of the day because we open this melon of growth. If you don't think outside of the box, if you're scared to have new ideas, if you just stick to the plan and stick to the process that somebody else developed for you, if that's all you do, you'll get stuck. And when you develop that box and you make it bigger, you've grown as an artist. So to close this one off, Sat is saying, I really love how UX designer speaks. I never create art for a company. I solve problems for them, except on the occasion a company can allow me to free myself. Art I do for myself, solving problems I do for them. I follow something like this, keeps a good sanity check. Yep, interesting, very interesting. This makes sense to me because I think I would give my attention to thinking outside of the box rather than developing the box. Ooh, that's deep. Let me repeat that. So Kaylin, what that makes so much sense there is that there's no box to think outside of for you. And so it's like you're a little bit lost because like you don't know if you're developing something outside of your process. It will definitely feel like something new, that's something fulfilling. And sometimes that's the best that we can have, I guess. Like you haven't developed that process so much, but you know that you have done something that motivates you and that feels good and new for you. And definitely that's something that I think is also very powerful. This question I love. Have you ever had to unlearn perfectionism in order to actually finish art? What did that process look like for you? I love this saying. Don't let perfect ruin great. I am a perfectionist. I am finalizing this render now that I am not 100% sure about. And I have all this pressure mainly from myself. And I'm making this render and I'm sending it to people and I'm already opening it as, do you think this represents my quality? And this is dangerous because what if it doesn't? What do we do? Do we throw this model to the trash? It's a model I like, I find it to represent my art, my story. It's this camera we did with my students. And I feel like I'm not gonna push it because it doesn't represent my quality. So this is what I'm doing. I'm letting perfect ruin great. And I think I do have a great model. I think I have something that I can be proud of. I think more than proud and ego, I think I have a model that I had fun with, that I learned something from, and that served a purpose. And I'm letting that ego, that perfectionism, ruin that model. To the point where this morning I was having this walk after playing with this render and I was thinking, I'm not gonna even like cameras anymore after this because I'm gonna hold it and I'm going to think, this brought this sort of bad feelings my way because I'm being too much of a perfectionist and definitely too self-critical. Instead, yesterday in the night, my friends were back here playing cards. Social batteries was completely drained. So I got a nice album and I started to prepare that render. And I enjoyed the process. And I was thinking, I don't mind if it's perfect. I'm just gonna push it and I'm gonna call it done. And maybe it doesn't represent my current quality. I don't know. I know maybe it doesn't. But is that all that matters when doing art? I feel like people are saying only keep the best pieces in your portfolio. I get that. You're using your portfolio to get a job and whatnot. But we forget that there's a process. And that process of learning also goes through having better pieces and having maybe pieces that mean more to you than they mean more to other people. And I think we should embrace this. We should embrace that if you had fun with a piece, if you're somewhat proud of it, and if it could help somebody else maybe be inspired, or it could spark an idea on somebody else's mind, I think those are 3 reasons big enough to push something. So don't let perfect ruin great. Because the effects of containing yourself and thinking this isn't perfect enough, if we let that perfectionism get the best out of ourselves, if we don't put these things out there and we embrace the consequences, because I know that when I push this piece, it's not gonna have, and this is again the pressure, it's not gonna have such a big reception as maybe other of my more perfect pieces had. And that's gonna make me feel like I took the wrong decision. I shouldn't have posted this, because people aren't liking it as much as I thought. But again, what's the base goal? Are we gonna do this with a with a diamond? What's the base goal? To have fun. I think another problem that we're facing with art is we're professionalizing it too much. We're making art too much of a professional thing, of a social media thing, of a thing that has to impress other people. Kaylin, you were 9-10 years ago. Well, thank you. This is art therapy, and I guess for me it's gonna be therapy of like feeling old as hell. I'm joking, it's fine. So for me, that's gonna be your question. The answer to your question, Kaylin, is don't let perfect ruin great. Don't stop doing something just because you think it's not gonna have that reception or because it doesn't follow your standards. If we can revert back to the box, perfectionism and not neglecting that bad feeling that can turn into an aggressive dog is part of developing a healthy process. So if you let perfect ruin great too many times, you might be one of the very lucky few who ends up with a portfolio that is perfect. But I know a lot of people who have failed in the process of becoming an artist because of the pressure, the immense pressure of being the perfect artist. So understand your goal. Your goal is to have fun. The goal is to learn. Have you at least achieved 85% of the goal? If the answer is yes, you are on the realm of greatness. 100% is perfect, and most of the time we aim for that 100%, and that 100% is what helps us to achieve the 85%. So it's good to have the idea of perfect. It's good to have a vision that you stick as closely as possible to. But I don't think it's good to let that perfectionism ruin something that is 85-90% of the way done. Because good enough, sadly, has received too much of a negative connotation nowadays. But if we actually break it down, good enough means good enough. This is really obvious. This probably crack some people up, I guess. But good enough is good enough. Good enough is not mediocre. Enough sometimes is what we should pursue, at least for the moments where we are feeling like I'm feeling today. It's kind of difficult to follow the sort of goals that you had set for yourself. I'm going to make the second session much better than the first one. But I guess this is the perfect example. This phrase, receiving the bad press that it's receiving nowadays, tells you enough about the problem that we have. Is that something that has a meaning of I have achieved the goal that I have set for myself, no more, no less, means that this isn't enough anymore. Achieving the goal is not enough anymore. Now I have to achieve the goal, and somehow in the process, I also have to make it in a perfect manner. So if that makes sense, we could maybe go to the chat. The chat that is calling me old, I can see that. I'm looking at you, Anna. We have great texts here. Roger is saying, it reminded me of the arcane quote, in the pursuit of great, we fail to do good. Absolutely. Somebody else in the chat is saying, the bar keeps going up and the better we get, not just in art, in anything. How do you keep the balance of being happy with your work but still wanting to improve? I guess that's the how. How do you not let perfect ruin great? How do you keep the balance of being happy with your work but still wanting to improve? The box is the process. It's the comfort zone. It's knowing who you are. So that's part of the judgment that you have to do. How do you keep the balance but still want to improve? That's the box. Let's call all of these the box. The box sometimes is your baseline. That's where you're coming from. That's who you are the moment you start learning or you start your that journey of wanting to improve. So how do I keep the balance of being happy? The first thing is I understand that baseline. Once you find that base level, you can start working from there. Without having that base that you know you can start working from, it's going to be impossible for you to be happy with your work, because you can have an idealistic vision of who you are, which isn't grounded on reality. And when that happens, it's all disappointment. But when you form your expectations based on something close to reality, you will most likely, most of the time, you will have a lower than ideal judgment of yourself. So you will think that you are maybe not as good as you are. But when you have that sort of baseline, it's all up from there. Because I think that also solves that second part. Do you know where to improve if you don't know where you fail? So you think you fail at something, but maybe in those two first exercises, you end up being very good at that. And actually, I'm so bad at texturing. And you put a special emphasis on texturing because maybe you're trying to compensate for your wrongful idea that you're bad at texturing. And you just end up making a better result. So when you have that sort of two assets to judge from, it's going to be a lot simpler to understand where the improvement needs to come from. So I think everybody should exercise a certain level of self-consciousness. Probably I go really overboard with this and I'm too self-conscious sometimes. Maybe we even notice this during this session. I'm too self-conscious and I know that I'm very tired. So I'm already trying to compensate from the beginning that I'm very tired. So I'm going to try to do better, blah, 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 blah. So that self-consciousness actually gives you that baseline. Pay close attention to your results and create some sort of field notebook where you're saying, during this piece, I found that I was lacking here, here, and here. And the next piece, you write that down and you're lacking here, here, and here. And on the third time, you're lacking on A, B, and C, the same way that you lack on the first and your second attempt. Then you have discovered a pattern. And that pattern is your baseline from which you can improve. So self-consciousness and thinking and reflecting on the steps that you take. When you're making a piece of art, be conscious of what you've done. And that's going to give you that sort of information. Look for information. Without information, you cannot make a decision. If you make an uninformed decision, problem. So look for information. So this is going to take practice. All of this is going to take practice. And that time that you made that mistake, probably that was the moment you realized a pattern. So that's good. So imagine, let's put ourselves in the position, that you present this work to somebody you care about. And they say, it's good enough. That's going to feel wrong. Definitely. So we have given it the connotation of it not being enough, when in reality, it's good enough. It's great. Yeah, it sounds like you got a 6. Exactly. Sufficient, it's sufficient. Which again, is not a negative thing by itself. Anya says, I will have a heart attack if someone says that to me. Yes, all of us probably will. But then that's just because we're letting our own interpretation of the word hurt us. Because let's say, all right, let's give us a good example for this. You go out and you're working on this, let's say, my dream. I'm working on Resident Evil 9, which has, in my opinion, an incredibly high quality bar when it comes to art. And game director comes in and says, this piece is good enough. It's going to make it into the game. That's a win. Because we just said, the quality bar is high, which means I made it to the quality bar that this director says my art is going to make it into the game. So if that person says this is good enough, in reality, it's a win. I made it into Resident Evil 9. It's just that we are a little bit perfectionists, all of us, and we're not happy with good enough. Let's make it quick. So, Kaylin, this is a great question. How do you separate the part of you that wants to be a craftsman from the part that just wants to be a human being living life? Routine. From 9 to 5:30, I'm a craftsman, living life also, by the way, because I made this choice. And I have to be very conscious about this. I chose this. Nobody else chose this for me. Nobody said you have to be a 3D artist. I said I want to be a 3D artist. So I'm a craftsman that chose their own craft. But let's say that sometimes these craftsmen feels like the craft is difficult, and it's challenging and it's tiring, and it makes staying afloat a challenge. So we feel the need to separate that human being living life, that thing that people say, touch grass, the need to touch grass, to separate yourself from the craft. And for me, that's routine. 9 to 5, I'm that craftsman. That's also living the life. But the times where this becomes difficult, I know that the moment the clock hits 5:30, I'm that free person who goes out and develops their plans. So absolutely, for me, it's 100% about routine. When your routine is messy, when you're just like, when my routine is messy, some people work very well without routine, but when my routine is messy, when things just feel like, hey, I'm just going to go here and do my thing, and I wake up when I wake up, and I go to bed when I go to bed. For me, that separation is difficult, because then we start to incur into did I do enough today? Did I do enough today to justify that I can take a break? Maybe not. So where is that separation happening? So I would say, even if you don't have that routine, that 9:30 to 5:30, at least try to count the hours that you've spent in your computer and create that balance, that healthy work-life balance of saying, okay, it's 8 hours a day for me, which is a lot of hours. 8 hours a day, it's a lot of hours. We think, well, I should work 12, but 8 hours, like try doing anything else for 8 hours. You're going to be tired. But yeah, for me, it's that routine. And if that routine isn't like written on a calendar, at least maybe try to control it as much as you can. If you do 4 hours in the morning and 4 hours in the night, that's fine. But then have that clear boundary towards yourself and kind of be a little bit like Gollum, the guy from the Lord of the Rings that has like this side A and side B of like his bipolar mind, and talk to yourself and say, why are you feeling like you didn't do enough if you did your 8 hours today? It doesn't make any sense. So be like Gollum a little bit. Yes, Gus, that's my advice. Be like Gollum. This is probably one of the most difficult questions that I've been asked, because it has so many different connotations. But let's jump into it. What do you do when different mentors or professionals give different feedback or advices, sometimes even opposite of each other? For example, one person saying to remove geo while another person saying to keep it. One person saying to hyper specialize when another tells you to know a bit of everything. One person saying to add your own creative spin while another tells you to stick to the reference 1-to-1, etc. So let's start. You're starting with this first example. You're starting with the technical advice. When I teach my students, I always talk about this thing called needs. When you're working on a project, you have needs. And the needs of the project are the rules of logic that dictate our actions. When you're building art for games, generally my go-to, this is again my box, my method, I'm based on needs. So I'm clearly communicated, or I try to find information, which is another thing we talked about, is we cannot make a decision without information. So that need is 50 centimeter view distance, which means that I am going to be looking at my object from not closer than 50 centimeters, but generally, like for example, on a first person game, that asset is going to be like 50 centimeters away from the camera. Then I also have a textile density, which is normally set for like first person assets, further away assets, and then like vista assets and whatnot. So these are the needs that I have. Very small list of needs that I gave you, but generally I will have this list of needs. As an artist and in production, what I would do is definitely try to find a conversation, a point where we can start a conversation with those two people. What do they mean? If they don't give you an answer, so no clear answer from policeman, then I'll follow my traffic light. And that traffic light is my needs. This is, I guess, the position that you're at. You have these two people who are giving you two very different and conflicting advice. So you cannot listen to them because they're making you be confused. So you're going to listen to the traffic light. And that traffic light is going to be your needs. But generally, this is what I would do. I would try to establish a conversation between the two conflicting feedback providers. And if I fail to do that, or any of the two has any time to do that, none of the two has any time to do that, then I would revert to the needs, to the logic. So no, you should add more geometry. You should remove some geometry. Okay, so I don't understand what you want. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a model that looks good from a 50 centimeter view distance, that doesn't have a polygon that doesn't need to be there. When it comes to the personal feedback, like for example, hyper specialize or know a bit of everything, that's more of like, what do you want to do? One thing you should never do is seek for validation, because a lot of people, they cannot go against your, like, what they think is the answer that you're going to like. So when it comes to the hyper specialization and when it comes to knowing a little bit of everything, try to look for examples of success. There's people who are really successful at hyper specializing, and there's people that are really successful at knowing a little bit of everything. There's the generalist role and there's the grooming role of people who only do hair for games. Look for examples. Reach out to those artists. Ask them, how did you get here? How did the journey look for you? And if that journey looks like something that you could feel comfortable in, knowing that your journey is going to be very difficult from their journey, maybe that's the journey that you have to take. And if it feels like that journey is definitely not, or you're making sacrifices, because when you hyper specialize, you have to make sacrifices. Maybe you love props as much as you love weapons, and hyper specializing in any of the two feels wrong. So I guess when you're going to follow advice, one thing that you have to think about is consequence. If you don't think about consequence and you follow blindly, every advice is bad advice. Blind following something is never the good idea, because every path like this one is going to be long enough that you're going to have to face problems. And when you face problems that are uncomfortable to face, or you weren't ready to face, or they demand sacrifices that you weren't ready to make, that's a path that wasn't right for you. And then one person saying to add your own creative spin, while another one tells you to stick to the reference one-to-one. This could be based on needs as well. Let's give you the example of GTA 5. They try to capture the essence of a model. We all know it's a Bugatti Veyron, but it's not really a Bugatti Veyron. That's the need of the project. So when it comes to your portfolio, again, look for examples. I can tell you my experience. Adding my own creative spin never has been a problem, and I could follow reference. I would say here's the thing. When you're adding your own creative spin, you're doing more of a creative effort than when you stick to the reference one-to-one. So adding your own creative spin, in my opinion, is going to give you more practice on 3D modeling than copying something one-to-one. Because you're going to have to think, you're going to have to develop creativity, you're going to have to develop some level of design know-how. But when you copy something one-to-one, which also will give you, great advantages like understanding functionality, doing better research, nailing proportions. I could say there's a lot of good things that come from sticking one-to-one and to give things your own creative spin. But when it comes to production, definitely the way to go is to adjust your needs to the needs of the project. So if lead says, give it a creative spin, then you give it a creative spin. Because as Sat said, you are solving a problem for a company. And that's probably the best way to go about this. Sat is asking, what is art to you? Art is inspiration, of course. Art is, something that evokes emotions. All of these basics that we understand art. But for me, art is purpose. And it's the medium through which I experience life. So the reason I had this problem was because since I'm still learning, I don't know better. So I feel like I have to listen to whatever the pro says. Yes, but I understand sometimes we have to, in a way, listen to the elders, but also never forget to also pay attention to your own feelings, Never stop to pay attention to your own feelings, how things make you feel. Be humble, of course, Try to never assume bad intention, because somebody might be saying something that you don't agree with. But generally, yes, don't forget to listen to your own feelings. And if somebody is telling you to do something that you don't agree with, I've been in this world for 30 years and probably only living under my own rules for the last 11. But I can tell you that not listening to other people's advice has, in equal weights, taken me to places where it justified for them to tell me, I told you, and also to places that justified me telling them, I told you. So your own experience and crafting that own experience is the most valuable thing that you can do. But again, you have to be strong for that. You have to be prepared. It's very easy to let others guide your path. and to get used to others guiding your life. It's really comfortable, you know, going to university and saying, if you want to be a good photographer, just do this. Oh, the key to success, you know, and following that in a way and having a routine that is set there for you and so on and so forth. And 100%, you know, it's really easy to do that. But in reality, at some point, you will demand more from yourself. You know, you will be in a position that where that guidance isn't valid anymore, isn't good enough anymore. And if you haven't developed that sort of follow your own path type of mentality, you will probably get lost again. And you know, this is how a lot of people fall in very bad places, because they're always looking for a guider, you know. The way to learn is not always to do what someone else says. Maybe the way to learn is to make a mistake and learning from that mistake. And we should never, ever, ever be scared of that. When you've made a million mistakes, that's when you are experienced. Andrea is saying, it's better to fail and understand why you failed than succeed but not understand why you succeeded. Hand-holding, although it feels safe, won't get you far in life. And 100%. Samir is saying, I'd say art is often very subjective, and so is your journey with it. So trusting yourself to trust the advice of others appropriately to what you want is key. Yes, trusting is key. I agree with that. But also, like, if you're trusting only because that's what you think the only way you have to move forward, then probably you're trusting for the wrong reasons. But when you're trusting somebody because that opinion also aligns with your vision for your own life, then you're trusting for the right reasons. And that's it. That's concluding our second episode of the art therapy. I didn't do any full thingies here, but yeah. If you're interested in learning more of what I do, please visit the website right there. Actually, the other hand, right there. And thanks everybody for being here. It was a very slow start today. It was a very challenging session for me today. But I think we got a great amount of advice, a great amount of experience from this one. And 100%, I think we got our goal met, which was to have fun. So thanks everyone for being here, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.